Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. It's Logan, back with another episode. Many of you are probably aware at this point that there's something very off around the dynamics between men and women. There's much confusion and sometimes downright hostility, and some of you may even be aware that this is being done very intentionally by social engineers of this world. So in this episode, I'm joined by polarity coach Mark Benet to get into some of the root causes and issues around this topic, as well as exploring polarity, specifically in the context of relationships and communication. I was very excited to get to talk to Mark about this topic. I think the information shared is extremely valuable, so I hope you find something useful. Let's get into it. Stay tuned. Greetings and welcome everyone to another episode of the Wizard Factory podcast, where together we explore the universe through ourselves. My name is Logan Hart. If you're new or not new, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit that bell notification down below, and take 2 seconds to boop the like button real quick, and let's get into it. I'm joined by the illustrious Mark Benet, a polarity coach. How would you describe yourself?
That's a good start. Polarity coach, polarity philosopher as well. So I do the coaching, which is really kind of grounded, terrestrial, but then I've got the philosophical aspect too. And then there's some other stuff, but we'll talk about that later, I suppose.
Sure, absolutely. And I was a little skeptical, even in writing my notes, to call it a philosophy. Not that it's not, but I know that it's all too easy, especially for those who are not in touch with their instincts, to over kind of intellectualize it, make it all about the cerebral aspect. So we'll get into all that. Yeah, welcome to the show. Happy to have you, and thank you for doing this, man. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you, brother. I'm honored that you invited me.
So polarity, the viewers here are probably a little bit familiar. We've talked about it some, but maybe not from this perspective per se. More of the Hermetic principles and the kind of yin and yang cosmic forces of the universe, but this is going to be a lot more ground level, man to woman, if those are real things or if those are just human constructs. I'm not really sure, but yeah, the point is, some stuff we may talk about in this episode could be very triggering.
Yes. Welcome to my world.
Sure, and that is perfectly fine. That's okay. What you do in that moment, that's what's important.
Yeah.
Well said. We can all get triggered. We all have work to do, especially in this domain. It is my belief that our sexual power and these aspects of ourselves are some of the most weaponized and suppressed for very specific reasons, which we're going to get into. So again, we all have this work to do. The real question is, are you going to take that trigger, that shock, as an opportunity to maybe take a look at some things that you might take for granted or to hold to be truth, and use it as a possibility to heal and grow from it? Because only a few months ago, a lot of this information was fairly new to me, and I did have to kind of really sit with it, and it seemed very foreign and sometimes even offensive at times. But the longer I dove deeper into it, I really started to make more sense and even clear away and shift some beliefs that I had. So it's going to be a lot to get into, but I hope that you'll stick around and enjoy the ride, because it's very useful stuff. I try to make sure we're bringing everything to be, relevant and useful, especially useful in this case. So let's get into it, man. I'd like to start just by kind of getting into your story. What's your background and how you came to come across some of this information, which you've now made more or less your life's work?
Yeah. So there's different ways to talk about my past. I'll discuss it in a way that's most relevant to this conversation. And I'll just say that I woke up in 2001, about 21 years ago, that spiritual awakening. And what I found in the wake of that awakening is that I kept on having a major problem in the relationship domain. And at one point I counted it up, and it's like 8 broken hearts over a period of like 30 years. So even there were broken hearts before that awakening and broken hearts after it. And I'm like, what's going on? You know, if you wake up spiritually and you find that identity with the all, and you're able to be in that illuminated state, but fuck, you keep getting your heart broken over and over and over again. What's up? What's going on? So I had interfaced with the OG of polarity, the guy David Data.
Okay. Familiar with him.
Wrote The Way of the Superior Man. He's kind of like the OG. And this was back in 2002 or whatever, and it's really about men finding the masculine, essentially. But you know something? Over a course of 18 years after reading that, and I met him a couple times, he's a great guy, I still couldn't figure it out. And it's because you can have all this great stuff in your head about masculine and feminine, men and women and all that. But at some point, it's got to be really, really anchored in your body.
Mm-hmm.
Because thoughts come and go, shift. You know, you can have one philosophy one year, another philosophy another year, whatever. But once your realization gets down deep in the body, then it's unshakable. And so I would say in the year 2019, was it? Yeah, beginning of 2019, it really sunk in at an instinctual level. That's the deepest, okay?
Mm-hmm.
When you understand masculine and feminine at an instinctual level, and this is a fun little story. I was in the Rockies in Colorado, about 8,000 feet, living in a cabin with no running water, an outhouse, solar panel electricity. And I was in a long distance relationship dalliance with a woman, and I crossed a certain threshold, Logan, and I realized, oh shit, I'm actually more into her than she's into me. Mm. And that's when I broke it off. And the reason, and after that happened, I said, you know what? And I put this out to the universe, as it were. The next woman I'm with is going to choose me 100%, and she's going to be 100% devoted to me. And that was the beginning of this whole new phase, which started off with what I call truth clock, which is post-spiritual masculinity, which is men reclaiming their dominance after they've been thoroughly emasculated by spirituality.
Sure.
And when I say dominance, I mean they're leading women with devotion. So they're in their power at an instinctual level. They know they need to lead. That's instinct. But their heart is online. And also, they've got good mind going on. They're not fucked up in their mind. And ideally, they're plugged into something spiritual. So I say post-spiritual masculinity. And ever since then, I just haven't looked back. I'm like, I know I need to lead. I know I need to be dominant. I know the woman needs to choose me 100%, be completely devoted, and submit to my devoted leadership. Mm. I will say that 15 times in the course of this podcast, and people will still misunderstand what the fuck I'm talking about.
Right.
Dominance, masculine dominance, is devoted leadership. To help people understand, it is like the relationship between a father and his 7-year-old daughter, except it's between two adults. The father is completely devoted to his daughter, and he serves his daughter. She submits to his leadership. He serves his daughter. That's how men and women are equal. The man serves, the woman submits, and that's how it works.
Very simple, yet can really get in the weeds when we start projecting our ideas, our triggers, our wounding onto some of those ideas. So right into the
Exactly.
nitty gritty already with some of that. That just
Very well
you
said.
got to
Thank
sit with that. Don't just automatically reject it just because it sounds wrong or because you feel a certain kind of way, and
Yeah.
really listen to the words that we're choosing very, intentionally with how we're speaking. Like Mark said, it's not just submission, it's not just leadership, it's devoted leadership.
Exactly.
That's a key differentiator. So then, before we get deeper into that, how did that turn from that point in the journey into becoming a coach and completely devoting yourself to this
Yeah.
craft?
So the short version of that story is me and Zach Rohde were just fortuitously came across each other's work. And for those who don't know, Zach Rohde is my business partner and the principal founder of the Academy. I'm a co-founder. He's the owner. I'm the CEO. We're just tight like that.
Mm.
And we were just in a common Facebook group, and he was just kind of trolling and just shit posting whatever. And I thought he was a nice guy. But then he came to my Facebook wall and he was like, whoa, what the fuck is this? And what I was putting out there, and I was not coaching at this point, I was just putting out my perspectives. That's all I was doing, just because that's what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And he really lit up and he took it. And then he started to apply what I was saying at a very ground level, basic terrestrial level with his wife. And then this is when Zach started to come up with the masculine and feminine communication template that we teach in the Academy, because he was trying to basically implement what I was talking about at this philosophical level, which is still comparatively grounded. See, I don't talk about masculine and feminine and all this abstract, metaphysical, archetypal, but I still do have a philosophical perspective. And then he just started grounding it, because he was trying to apply it in his marriage. And so he got really specific communication, masculine and feminine communication practices. And then at one point, we were starting to chat more, and Zach is always really respectful whenever we were addressing each other. Very respectful guy. I remember that more than anything. He thought I was really weird. Nice, but weird. And so then I said, hey, buddy, I'm just going to publish my first book called Truth Cock. And he's like, well, why don't we just go into business together? Little did I know that I was aligning with a business genius. I had no idea. Zach is extremely talented in the business domain. I had no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got all this knowledge in the relationship area. And so we collaborated, and then it just grew from there. And that's how I became a coach. So I didn't set out to be a coach. Someone said, hey, you want to coach? I said, let's do it. And I'm actually glad it's like that, because if people are all about coaching, then I'm a little bit suspicious. Not always.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of hubris that tends to come with that territory, which, like you said, it's a lot better that it sort of just unfolded that way, almost by happenstance. Yes, organically. Perfect word.
Yeah. And not only is there hubris, Logan, there's so much wounding, which is actually almost like the flip side of that hubris. If hubris were heads, the wounding is tails.
Yes.
And so a lot of people can be coaches, but they're really just coaching their wounds.
That's very true. Typically, that hubris is an overcompensation of sorts.
Exactly.
They're making up for something that they feel a lack or insufficient or inadequate in. So,
yeah.
Okay, so now that we've kind of set the stage and given some background as to what you do, I want to kind of tie those two together, because I think it's super fascinating. All of these cosmic grandiose forces, they're still at play. They're still very much relevant, but then that's not always so practical, and we want to bring that down to the ground level. So I personally would word that like, when it comes to the practical application, there's no better way for these cosmic forces to show up than through the communication aspect, especially in romantic. But you could, once you start kind of becoming aware of these things, you start seeing those roles being played out in every interaction in some form or another, even between platonic males or whatever have you.
Yeah. So tell me what angle you want to take when we just kind of when we take a bite out of this.
Maybe just starting by kind of joining those two worlds, the super hyper spiritual, which is still very much relevant and useful to look at and come to understand, and then bringing that down to the ground level. A side note too, because it's a common thing you hear, especially with whatever you want to say, leftist kind of ideology, this gender ideology, this kind of stuff, that, gender is simply a human construct born of the old world where survival was the paradigm, and these roles just kind of came about through that survival paradigm. Whereas I see it as they're as above, so below, right? So these masculine and feminine energies are present in all things. It's the very creative equation of or formula of all of creation, all of existence. How it came to be was by these two energies interacting and creating manifestations. And then we are a product of nature and, eons of life and evolution playing out those fractals of those larger things. And we're not inventing this stuff. We're actually reflecting that, like the moon reflects the light of the sun.
No, that's beautifully put, man. Yeah. So with regard to social constructs, this is something I've given a little bit of thought to and even posted on my wall, that the social construct that gender is only a social construct is itself only a social construct. So what we're really talking about is we want the social construct to be grounded in biology, essentially, so that there's an integration of noosphere and biosphere. But a noosphere, a renegade noosphere, like militant feminism, angry third wave feminism, is dissociated from the biosphere and just says all of your philosophizing and perspectivizing about the biosphere is just social construct used for power grabs. But in fact, what I say is that social construct, that gender is only a social construct, is itself only a social construct.
Wow.
It is basically about these advanced dissociated intellectuals saying that every time you don't agree with my perspective, you're an oppressor.
It's gaslighting.
It's gaslighting, exactly.
Wow.
It is gaslighting. So what we really want is an integration of biosphere and noosphere, which is to say that all of our social constructs are grounded in our biology. So the social constructs of gender roles are grounded in masculine instinct and feminine instinct. And again, serving and submission. So the man has his gifts that are used to serve the woman, but that only happens when she submits to his primary gift, which is to lead. He is leading with devotion, which means he is dialed into his woman. He's dialed into her feelings, her needs, her desires, her problems. Okay? And what we do in the academy, which is where I coach, is we help women share those needs, desires, problems, and feelings without blame, without leading, without judgment. Now, that's very, very grounded, because when they do that, they inspire devotion in men. These men serve. But the man has to coach the woman to not blame, judge, and lead with their feelings, needs, desires, and problems. And that's how intimate this dance is. And the reason the man has to do that is because she was born and raised in a trauma matrix on a prison planet that inverted her and inverted him. So our conditioning is inverted. Men are being feminized and women are being masculinized. They're being inverted ideologically through their indoctrination in these indoctrination camps we call schools and colleges. And they're also being warped through the media and through entertainment. They're also being warped chemically.
Yes.
Through stuff in the water and in the air.
Food, cosmetics, you name it.
And then most likely on a genetic level as well through successive generations. So that, like, for instance, if parents get certain vaccine, can we say that word on this? They get certain injections, whatever,
Yeah.
that can have a transgenerational effect. So the masculinization of women and the emasculation of men is like from all angles, all the time, 24/7, from birth to the grave. So men actually not only have to become dominant in the sense of leading their women with devotion, they have to become dominant in the sense that they have to become masters of themselves, self-mastery. Men who do not master themselves in a trauma matrix on a prison planet are getting fucked up the ass all the time. They have to self-mastery. So that's another key aspect of dominance, that a man cannot lead a woman with devotion if he's not in command of himself.
That's so on point. And what that's bringing up for me is we tend to take a very paganistic, animistic perspective on this channel. I believe that's kind of the default worldview, sans dogmatic indoctrination, is just viewing nature, the natural cycles, the natural orders playing out. That's what we're talking about here in this context. And so what better way to perfectly and beautifully depict that than getting back to the biology? Because the head is where shit gets fucked up, where things go awry, where,
Yes.
Like you said, the construct is the construct is the construct. It's like this glitch in the matrix that's in denial of itself and the truth of it. So what better way to reconnect than get out of the head, get into the body? This is nature. This is the vessel that actually exists in reality, not in some hellish, Marxist nightmare, whatever you want to say, and reconnect with the sometimes higher intelligence of the body, listening to that instinct.
So part of the indoctrination that we're subject to in the West is hypercogitation at the expense of integration with the body. So this is a seamless circuit. Body mind, psychosomatic.
Yes.
Okay, body mind is one word. Psychosomatic is one word. But the way that we're educated is from the neck up. And that there's a deliberate reason behind that, because when you get people exclusively identified with the neck up, you can hijack their amygdala really easily. When you hijack their amygdala, that means that you have control over what they fear, and then you get to control them. When the education, the indoctrination dissociates people from their body, they don't have that natural compass of truth in their felt body because they can't feel their body. Okay? Your body will tell you when shit's fucked up if you know how to listen. So you've got tens, maybe hundreds of millions of people allowing themselves to get JABBED because they are dissociated from their body. Now, go out into the wild. No wild animal will allow you to JAB it. No wild animal will allow you to stick something into their body. They will fucking fight you and eat you and kill you if that happens. So why do we as humans allow ourselves to be JABBED? It's because of the way we've been educated and dissociated from our body and ultimately dissociated from our instinct.
For sure. And I definitely think that the false belief in authority is a lot to do with that as well.
Yes.
The medical authority, what the governmental authority, whatever it's perceived as, we know what's best for you better than you know for yourself. Just trust us and do what we say. And again, the animal instinct is in direct opposition, but that's being so disconnected, suppressed, cut off from that it's has no power. It has no ability to, resist. Exactly.
It's buried. And that's what part of what we do in the coaching in the academy is we basically put people back in touch with their instinct. Okay. really that's what it is. And that's why what we're coaching and talking about is different than pretty much everyone, because everybody else is peddling philosophies about masculine and feminine polarity. We're just saying, get into your instincts, which you've been dissociated from since you were in elementary school, feel that shit, and then you'll know what the heck we're talking about. And I love philosophy. I have a background in philosophy, but it's the philosophy that's integrated with the instincts that is necessary. Philosophy that's not integrated with the instinct, not integrated with the body and with the heart, is just going to be abstract masturbation.
Yeah. And if it's not based in truth, then what good is it as a philosophy anyways? And where is truth? Truth is here. It's in reality. It's in the physical where your body is too.
Yeah. And when people are dissociated from their bodies, it's very easy for them to think truth is relative. And that's the reason why, because they can't feel truth in their body. So one truth is just as good as any other truth up here in the mind. But once you get down into your body and you live in your body, then you realize, you know what? All quote unquote truths are not equal. Okay. There are things that are truth and some things that aren't truth, you know?
Yeah. And for sure, relativism, solipsism, some of the most destructive, dangerous, just pure mind virus,
Yeah, it really is.
Thinking.
It just leads right into nihilism.
Yeah.
If you're a relativist and solipsist for long enough, you're just going to end up being a nihilist.
And it will cause a collapse of a society or an empire, which we're literally having a front row seat to as we speak. This is exactly what's happening. It's because we're so disconnected from truth, because truth is the one, it's the all, it's the great uniter. So if we're all walking around living in our own little truths, my truth and your truth, and they can all just coexist and everything. No, they can't. And that's why the world is on fire.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why that predicament exists is because of the quote unquote hyperfeminization of things, where you can't make any judgments because then you'd be oppressive. But it's actually how the masculine discerns truth and what should be done versus what shouldn't be done is through judgment. And not that weak sauce everybody says, discernment. No, that's weak sauce. Judgment is this versus that, good versus bad, evil versus good. All of these very clear-cut distinctions. And when a man really, really aligns with that, he's got a spine and he's got a backbone. So, pedophilia is not just a matter of opinion. Oh, that's your truth. I'm attracted to well, I don't even want to say those words, even role playing it. One person says that they're, attracted to children and that's just their truth. No, absolutely not. But if you make it a relativistic domain, then it's like, oh, well, that's just your truth. And when you do that, you'll notice that there are forces in this world, there's evil in this world that not only takes advantage of relativism, it generates relativism because it knows that that's the paved path to domination. Get everybody thinking there's no such thing as truth, very easy to subjugate them, and they won't even know it.
Yes, to dominate violently, to violate, to infringe upon. These are behavioral betrayals of truth, the truth that we all have equal rights. So, but the truth is the kryptonite of abusers and tyrants.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it behooves them to obscure, destroy, suppress truth any ways they can. So this solipsistic world, that's like their wet dream. That's like perfect. I can do whatever I want, and then gaslight them when they say that's bad. Oh, that's judgmental. That's just your truth. What stood out to me too about what you said there, because I've come across this when I've talked about judgment and pushing on that a little bit, of that's given such a bad name, especially in this highly Abrahamic Western world that we live in, where judgment's bad and you just love your neighbor and it's all gravy. And I've had that kind of come up in the comments about, well, I prefer discernment. That's a better,
Yes.
softer, easier word. It doesn't trigger me so. Well, let's look at those words briefly. What's the real difference between discernment and judgment? They're kind of the same in that you're distinguishing between two things. But that's just what discernment is this is this, that's that, but it's neutral. Judgment is discernment plus values. You're actually judging and weighing one as better than the other. And how else can we do that but through truth? I mean, sure, you can judge two kinds of ice cream, and that's purely subjective. But to say that, in terms of, like you said, say pedophilia, for an example, absolutely, you better judge that. Because
you better judge the shit out
because that's where moral truth comes from, is the conscience, conscience, with knowing. It's not believing or with my opinion, it's with knowing. You can't have knowledge without truth.
Yeah. So all judgment includes discernment, but not all discernment includes judgment. So you look out and you can just say, oh, there's clouds in the sky. That's a discernment. There's no judgment there. But you cannot make a judgment without discernment. But the judgment also has the values, and there's a moral urgency there as well. Now, sometimes there's more moral urgency than others. But if you are a relativist and you just say, oh, we're not going to judge the pedophiles, then all of a sudden you're surrounded by them, because it's not just, you could be surrounded by them. I'm not saying it's going to happen, although there's an agenda to make it happen. And so it's like this agenda that is in play through some really sick psychopaths is trying to remove masculine judgment and to gaslight masculine judgment. And there's a total performative contradiction in the woke community that says judgment is bad.
Which is a judgment.
Exactly. It's the performative contradiction. So if judgment is bad, then you can't even judge judgment is bad without committing the crime of judgment. So if what you're saying is true, then you're contradicting yourself. If what you're saying is false, well, then it's false, and I can ignore what you're saying. So we are in a qualitative cosmos. Okay? There's better, there's worse. So what these people are trying to do is establish the truth that there's no truth.
Yes.
And it's so fucking neurotic and insane.
The most self-defeating argument ever.
Yeah. And it, very well said. And that contributes to the emasculation of men. Because if men are living in a world where there's no truth, then that has a catastrophic effect on their masculine agency. Mm-hmm. There's no truth to wake up to instantiate in your lives, to implement. There's no truth for leading anything. So why would you do anything? Oh, you know what I will do? Since there's no such thing as truth, I'll beat off to porn 3 hours a day because it's just pleasure. All I can think about is pleasure. And I won't have anything of real meaning in my life because there's no such thing as truth.
Yeah, and I'd love to get into that topic a bit later, but also it made me think of how, well, the protector, the warrior, is a powerful and vital masculine archetype. Well, if there's no truth, what is there to fight for? What is there to protect? You have no judgment to say, well, that's the enemy, that's the good guy. How do you even know the difference?
Right. So there's an analogy I use quite frequently. Just take a time machine back 500 years and you're in some village in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and you're on a plain outside of the village, and on the right-hand side there's 100 men, and on the left-hand side there's 100 men. And on the right-hand side, all these men are really masculine and dominant, like really intense dominant. And on the left-hand side, you've also got 100 men, but there's a spectrum. So maybe only the first 10 of those men resemble the energy of the 100 men on the right-hand side. So 10 of them on the left share the same frequency as the 100 on the right. But then there's a steady decline until the last 10 are totally emasculated, like the woke guys today. When you're on that field and you're looking at these two groups of men, which group emanates more truth?
Hmm.
You can feel the truth of the guys on the right because they're all in their masculine instinct. When a man is in his masculine instinct, he is embodying the truth of his being.
Man, that's a very poignant observation, because it could be said that the truth itself is belligerent because it is at war with ignorance and illusion. So this neutral, oscillating, fluid aspect, there's nothing powerful about that. It's neutered. It's neutral.
It is neutered. It is neutered. And so what men, guys that have grown up in the late 20th and early 21st century, they've been given this deadly mind venom that says masculinity is toxic. And check this out. The message is masculinity doesn't exist. And when it does, it's toxic.
Right.
Another complete contradiction. So there is no positive messaging about masculinity.
That's another.
Masculinity doesn't exist, and when it does, it's toxic. That's what we're dealing with, Logan.
Right.
That's the systemic emasculation in the West.
Totally on point. The solipsism is, again, just revealing itself. It's just like when, a woman is anyone who identifies as a woman. But what is that? Well, it's just what I identify as. Yeah, but what is that? Yeah. What is the thing that you're emulating?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's all just this kind of narcissistic defiance. And the idea is that all of these things are social constructs and they're out to oppress me. And therefore, I must defy it by changing my gender 4 times by the time I'm 18. Right? It's like, this is narcissistic defiance, and it makes, humans want to be free, but what is it that they're being free of? Okay? So if you're wrongly indoctrinated, then you're fighting the wrong enemies. You're fighting the real enemy has given you wrong enemies to fight, to camouflage itself. So the fake enemy that's being put into the school system and media and entertainment is, well, buddy, I hope I can say this on your program. One of the major enemies that is a fake enemy is the white straight male, which we happen to be. And so that is being put up as an enemy. Yep. And so all these people are fighting that as an enemy. So I'm 48 and I graduated from college in 1998. And I like to joke around that I got a minor in self-loathing because before, got a major in literature and a minor in self-loathing. Because when I entered college, You didn't know what a bastard you were. I didn't know, exactly. I didn't problematize myself for being white, straight, and male. That wasn't a problem for me. But when I got out of college, it was a problem that I was white, straight, and male. And that will show you what college is in a nutshell. It's pure indoctrination. And so even back in the mid to late 90s, that infiltration, that Marxist socialist infiltration had already begun. It had begun before that, but it was definitely in full swing by then. So then, the enemies, what's happening is there's a divide and conquer agenda to divide human beings down to the neurons. So one neuron is fighting another neuron in your brain. Okay, and those neurons are fighting with each other, and these neurons are fighting with your body, and then these neurons are fighting with your girlfriend and your parents and your children and your friends and this other race and this other sexuality, whatever. It's all about getting the slaves to fight each other so the conquerors can continue with their unabated agenda.
Yeah.
And so they have to create fake enemies into the slave populace in order for the slaves to fight each other
Instead of them.
Instead of them.
Yeah.
And that's where this masculine feminine stuff is so important. Because once you understand masculine feminine on this instinctual level, and the man is here to serve the woman who submits, she submits, he serves, then the divide and conquer agenda is itself conquered at a very fundamental and very important level. Because one of the most primary divisions that these psychopaths have engineered, is the division between man and woman. And that's what they want to divide, among other things. But once you heal that division, then guess what you have? You have a dominant man who will die for his woman and his children and will not let you fuck with them at all. At all. And that's, imagine having an entire population that you're going to try to subdue where all the men are dominant and will not let you fuck with their wife and children. You can't do it. They'll fight to the death to resist your agenda.
Truth bomb right there, man. That right there just, hit the nail on the head in terms of why not only they're trying to distract that energy from being directed at them, but it makes the opposite true, that they're weak and easily conquered, easily divided and conquered, like you said. And so how do you cut off someone from their power? You make them ashamed of it, like you just said, exactly. Through that indoctrination. It's incredibly profound, and it's so simple and fucking obvious how it's happening, yet so many people are falling victim to this because I would say they're wounding, it keeps the horse blinders on. People don't want to look at their pain. They don't even want to acknowledge it, much less feel through it, try to heal through it. But that's why we're choosing that blindness.
Yeah. And another aspect is inverted morality. So men are told that they're good if they cut their balls off and they cut their cock off.
Right.
So you're really a good man. The masculine man is the man who becomes more feminine. You're a good man, the more feminine you become.
The less of a man you are.
Exactly. You're a good man, the less of a man you are. That is inverted morality. No, you become a good man by becoming more devoted with your power.
Your truth cock.
Taking on more responsibility. Truth cock, exactly.
I love that. Hey guys, hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I just want to take a quick moment to offer you a special gift. It's the free initiation package download. This is a free download package that includes the Toolbox mini course. I created this package to equip you with all of the essential tools you need for any type of energetic or magical practice for anyone serious about their spiritual development. It's comprised of 3 parts: the circle, the breath, and the voice, where you'll learn how to cast the circle of the Magi, various breathwork techniques, including a powerful guided breathwork meditation, rune galler, and more. You'll also get access to the Inner Sanctum, our private Facebook group and Discord server, as well as some Wizard Factory wallpapers for desktop and mobile, all for free. And for those who've already seen this course, I'm happy to announce that this is a brand new remake with better production and even more information. You can find the link to get yours in the description below. So check it out and let's get back to the content.
Yeah.
Cool, man. So there's a lot of different ways we could take this. Real quick, I did want to share a comment because you were talking about it starting with the neurons fighting, and then the word cognitive dissonance popped into my head. But then you said it's head and body too. It's like fractaling out from that root where that's like a psychosomatic dissonance. And then, the inner and outer worlds are at war with each other. It's all of this chaos and conflict. Whereas again, truth is perfect and whole and complete. It is not at odds with itself whatsoever. Only in the mind can we create these distortions and illusions. So if you're not starting with truth, you're going to be lost from the get-go. It has to start there and let everything else fall into place.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why truth is not some relativistic thing is, again, because there is a body. Your body will tell you if you know how to listen. But let's say that you dissociate from the body and you're plugging into CNN, and then they're talking about getting the next BOOSTER, and all of a sudden you have this one thought here, oh, I should get this BOOSTER because they're telling me to. And then there's this other thing right here of fear, like, oh, well, what if I get this and it's not good for me and I have side effects? What are the long-term effects? And oh, my friend over next door got really sick after the last BOOSTR. And all of a sudden, you're in battle in your own mind. The reason that you're in battle is because that BOOSTER is not good for you. And yet you're plugged in to this CNN and the mainstream news media because you're told that this is where the truth is. And you don't know any better because you're dissociated from your body. Because
you got no judgment.
You got no judgment.
Because you're pious like that. But there's only one truth. So that battle, that's within you and your own distortions, not from truth itself. You've got to get your discernment, your instincts back online to even figure out what that is.
Yeah. And so the thing is, for people listening, the world does not have to be a f***ed up place. And part of this psychological operation that is foisted upon humanity is the idea that it is inevitably a f***ed up place. Oh, this is just humanity. We're f***ed up. No. All of this fuckery that is afflicting human beings is generated top down. Of course, once it's generated top down, then of course human beings become these amplifiers of it. And so we fuck each other over, but it's only because we're being contaminated. If you removed this whole skull cap of cabal ontology that's sucking the life force out of human beings and enslaving them, then what would happen is the natural law that's in our bodies would have a chance. It still has a chance. It's actually ultimately more powerful than this 24/7, 365 propaganda machine. Because this propaganda machine that we're born into, this what I call the trauma matrix on a prison planet, requires extraordinary energy to keep functional. The more people wake up to it, the less energy it has to self-perpetuate, because this propaganda machine self-perpetuates two primary sources: the top-down influence from the cabal, whatever you want to call them, the cult, whatever, there's a lot of different names.
Social engineers.
From top down, but then from each other. We do it to each other. More people wake up, the less they are receiving it top down, but the less they are multiplying and amplifying it with one another. And then that has an exponential effect. I like to say it this way, Logan. Imagine you just had 100 people. And it was 50-50. 50 people are zombies, 50 people are awake. One of those zombies wake up, it's a difference of 2 now. It goes 51-49. 49 zombies, 51 awake people. Then 52-48. Now, then 53-47. By the time you get to 60-40, that 60 is actually exerting more of an influence on that 40 than the 51-49 difference.
Right.
And then it goes to 70-30 even faster. And when you get to 70-30, 80-20, and that's why it gets exponential.
Slowly at first and then all at once.
Yeah. I mean, we're dealing with some extremely comatose human beings. There's people who are asleep and there's people who are comatose.
Profound. Yeah, I was thinking about the fields in the Matrix. As you mentioned, the Matrix, that's the kind of power that it takes to keep the system going.
Yes.
It's like these massive pillars, just generating all this electricity.
So we talked about inversion. There's a inversion, and that's part of an agenda. The inversion is to masculinize women and feminize men. And that creates the war of the sexes. So what we do in the Academy for Dominant Men and Radiant Women is reverse the inversion through communication primarily. Men are using masculine communication, women are using feminine communication. So masculine communication uses judgments, directives, correctives, leading questions. It takes charge. It knows that its language and its energy is a gift to the woman. So the man doesn't flip out of this masculine communication when he's dominant. He's committed to it. And if he were to flip out of it, he would start to get inverted and start using what we're calling feminine communication. Feminine communication is the vulnerable and permissive sharing of feelings, needs, desires, and problems. So vulnerable means without judging, without blaming, without leading. When a woman stays in that feminine communication, she's fundamentally submissive to the devoted leadership of the dominant man. If the man at any point is being domineering, a jerk, or an asshole, then she can use feminine communication to share how she feels. If he continues to be a domineering jerk asshole, then she flows away using of feminine self-worth. So we coach women to have feminine self-worth and men to have masculine self-worth. Masculine self-worth is leading with devotion, essentially. Feminine self-worth is knowing that the woman knows that she deserves to be cherished with devoted leadership. She is worthy of all the provision that is coming her way from the devoted and dominant man. So that's how we're handling the inversion. That is a top-down agenda that is used to divide and conquer human beings, specifically masculine men and feminine women. In fact, the agenda is to obliterate masculinity and femininity. Once you obliterate masculinity, you're also going to take femininity with it. Because those two only make sense with respect to each other.
Yeah, and really it makes so much sense when you think about it, in terms of like, yeah, we could talk about the big picture and the war and all of this, and that's all very true, just much like these higher grandiose ideas about masculine and feminine, but where the rubber really meets the road is interpersonal relationships. And those are built upon communication. Communication is everything. When the communication is dead, the relationship is dead.
Yes,
so if you don't get that on point, that's where it all begins. So one way I like to look at this from my studies of you and Zach's work is the goal is to get your needs met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Both are effective at getting your needs met, but they're just done in a different type of tone, a different vibration, different energy. That's one's masculine, one's feminine, but they both kind of have the same means to an end, and it's an extension of being autonomous person, sovereign, personal responsibility. These are all at play here. So
yes,
the man is responsible for his actions, for setting his own boundaries, for caring about her heart and her feelings.
That's right.
But she's responsible for expressing her feelings.
Absolutely.
And if he truly values that, she doesn't need to set boundaries. She doesn't need to give directives or be attached to any kind of outcome, because he will do that for himself. And if he is not, then as you said, her feminine self-worth is then online. She can choose that when the time is right to no longer engage in that type of relationship. Why would she? So there's so many misconceptions that are easy to just kind of project on this about, like, he just makes all the decisions and doesn't care about her, and then like she's totally cut off from her power because she can't give any directives. I mean, these are all things that I came across in trying to like figure, make heads or tails of everything. I think it's important to note here, masculine communication has been normalized, especially in the West here. That's kind of how everybody talks, So that's what feels
for women, I would say. It's been normalized for women because men start to gaslight themselves if they start using it, if they start using judgments and directives. I don't see it as normalized for men unless you're starting to get out of the cities and you're getting more rural. Then I see it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess maybe I'm saying it kind of a blend of both is so, and we could touch on this, but that's sort of what I see a nonviolent communication is
Okay.
kind of taking these principles and these both masculine and feminine styles and just globbing them into one thing where you express
Mhm.
your feelings, but then you give an outcome and say, this is what I'd like you to do about it.
Oh yeah.
And I'm not judging you and I'm not making any kind of judgments, but this is just what I would like to get my needs met and stuff. Again, I do think that has a place maybe for interpersonal, like workplace disputes or something like that, where you might need a certain kind of approach to get things, but especially in a man to woman frame, that is a surefire way to depolarize,
Yeah.
demagnetize the relationship, because you're just kind of, again, neutering it,
Yeah.
neutralizing it.
Yeah. Men, women, you can really feel into what we're talking about here when you noticed last time you were in the presence of a really masculine man, how you felt. Something felt magical in your body, provided you're not too masculinized to feel your body. What is that? What is it that was so special about this man's energy that made you light up and made your heart sing? It's masculine instinct. And this man is got it online. So, men, if you're having a hard time understanding what we're talking about, try to remember the last woman, lady that you interacted with who was so radiant that she absolutely captivated you. And you were like, oh my God, that is the most radiant woman. I would do anything to serve, protect, cherish that woman.
Mm.
That's what we're talking about. Now, you may say, well, that's really rare. And I would
Yeah.
say, that's the point. That's why we're doing what we're doing in the academy, because it shouldn't be rare. It should be the normal state of affairs.
Great.
We should be surrounded by masculine men and feminine women, but it's been so inverted. And part of that is men are using more feminine communication. They're expressing their feelings, needs, desires, and problems. And women are totally in judgments. There's so many masculinized women in judgments and leading men.
Mm.
I mean, I go out there in this dominant frequency out in the world, I still have women trying to lead me. And I don't compromise. I'm like, hey, sweetheart, you're leading right now. Don't lead. Tell me what you're feeling.
This is one way that kind of came across to me of looking at this when studying this stuff. I think you'll really like this, where consider this statement. The man is the head of the household. Okay. That already triggered somebody, I know. The woman is the heart of the household.
There you go.
And if your assumption is that one of those is superior to another, you're probably indoctrinated.
Yes, exactly.
They're both vital components to the whole, and they complement each other perfectly.
Yeah. And what we're really talking, see, this is another thing. People think that what we're talking about is regressive. It's not regressive. We're actually trying to evolve specifically men, but also women. But what happens is when you connect the heart to masculine and instinct, the man starts to evolve. Okay, so you have all this indoctrination about how bad the patriarchy is. Now, that's all angry feminism reconstructing history according to its own agenda. Patriarchy, okay, and then another thing about patriarchy is that that's also a psyop used by the cabal to camouflage itself, part of that socialist Marxist agenda. But patriarchy, properly understood in its right form, is a dominant man who's the head of the household, who loves all the people in his family and serves them with devotion. That's the patriarchy. That is not regressive. That is the truth of natural law.
Mm.
So we're not being regressive here. What we're trying to do is correct a perversion. We're trying to correct a systemic inversion that masculinizes women and emasculates men and creates a war of the sexes, so that men and women are divided for the sake of this agenda, which is to enslave humanity. It's all interconnected,
yes,
as you very well know.
So on point. And don't forget that natural law is the engine, the driving force behind evolution.
Yes.
So if you deviate from that, you begin to de-evolve.
Yeah.
De facto,
Very well said.
not invariably.
Very well said.
So you could call it regressive, but it's getting back to the truth, back to nature, because we've deviated from it. It's not going back in time. It's getting back to a place where we can actually move forward again.
Yeah, exactly. Getting back to the place before the deviation. And this is another point to illuminate the audience. When that top-down influence gets people to deviate from natural law, it's because they're predators / parasites. So when you take human beings out of their alignment with the natural law in their bodies, out of alignment with truth, and when you're aligned with your body and in your truth, you also have a clear connection to the cosmos. This is how it's oriented cosmologically. If you are dissociated from the truth of natural law in your body, you cannot have a really healthy connection to the cosmological totality, to eternity, to the divine. Okay, and this is another whole other conversation. This is how it's interrelated cosmologically. If you're dissociated, then that compromises you cosmologically, metaphysically. So what this agenda is about is that it's about predation and parasitism. When you get people out of natural law, that they're easy pickings.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a predator. And then part of that is the simultaneous indoctrination of people to say that there is no predators out there. Right? We're in the animal kingdom, everyone. And the reason you don't know that is because the top predators have convinced you that we're not in the animal kingdom. We're in the animal kingdom. There's predators and prey. And those predators are other human beings who invert natural law through indoctrination, and then they just pick you off so that you get to be their little slave. That's what's going on.
Poignant observations. I love that for sure. So here's a side note, because I know a lot of the viewership here is men. So this will probably be a question that they're asking. We've talked a lot about submission and leadership in terms of a man to woman. And for fear of deviating too much, because I feel like this might be a thing that we could unpack a lot of here. I've heard you mention some about the inner masculine and feminine. We might have even some different ideas about that, but maybe just kind of semantics or something like that usually is the case in terms of, the inner masculine and feminine. But I think, so at an operational level, we all need, again, it's unavoidable. Both of these energies are all pervasive. Like, for example, to eat food is feminine because you're receiving, you're taking in, even you might not think of it that way, but that's kind of, your very existence physically is masculine because you're penetrating the mater, the mother, that, so women who have a physical body are exhibiting a masculine energy by existing in a body, by penetrating reality. So these kind of things, like, it's impossible to be 100% one or the other. That's the point that I'm making. But the point is, the power lies in embodying that as your main way of showing up and navigating life, essentially. Is that?
Well, I mean, I look at it a little differently, but I totally see what you're saying. So the way I look at it is that there are these activities and dynamics kind of fractally with correspondence, as above, so below. But when we get down to the level of the instincts, that's when masculine and feminine really is the terminology I use. And when it comes to communication, that's the terminology I use, masculine and feminine. When it comes to the behavior of men and the behavior of women, then I use masculine and feminine. But when I leave those spheres, I actually don't transcribe masculine and feminine outside of that, because then that would lack the kind of resolution that I want. But I still think those dynamics that other people would call masculine and feminine exist. I just don't use the term masculine and feminine to describe it. So, my use of masculine and feminine is actually quite circumscribed and quite limited. But the reason I do that is so that I can get real traction and real results with people. So someone that I was coaching were like, are horror movies masculine? And I was like, I don't do it that way. I talk about behavior and communication and instincts as being masculine or feminine. So what I would say, the way I unpack this a little differently from you, is I say that when a man is in feminine energy, it's performative, but it's not intrinsic. When a woman is doing the masculine, it's performative, but not intrinsic. And the reason is that because from my own experience, when I was more into my not mastering my feelings, vulnerably sharing my feelings, all that, not leading, it was not home. But when I got into my masculine dominance and led with devotion, I found home. And I found that I just don't do feminine energy. Now, someone could look at me and say, oh, there's feminine here. Some other guy was like, writing poetry is feminine. I was like, no, writing poetry is not feminine. There's masculine energy that writes poetry and feminine energy that writes poetry. And so with women, you'll notice that if women run a lot of masculine energy, they start to feel really stressed out and anxious. Why? Because it's not home. It's not intrinsic. It's performative. They could do it. I can be in my feminine. When I do role plays, Logan, you might have even seen them. When I did the role plays in the masterclass, I can fucking channel some serious feminine energy. I'm also an actor. But after I do it, I have to like detox. I'm like, this is not right for me. And my woman, when she runs a lot of masculine energy, oh man, she pays for it. It's expensive.
Energetically. Okay. Yeah, that clarifies some. So it's like you can look at some of those. Everything has an energetic
frequency,
resonance, so to speak. Yeah. I do actually think in some terms, like horror movie. Okay, what makes it horror? Well, it's a survival situation. That's kind of the male domain, where the protector comes in, the defensive, self-defense, things like that, aggression even. I also think like heavy metal music, more aggressive music. And I always kind of make a little note about like women that are super, super hardcore metalheads tend to be very masculine all around. Yeah, just kind of like what they're drawn to. But
have you found any feminine heavy metal? I have not found any feminine heavy metal.
And that's not, saying anything negative about like female metalheads or women who run businesses or any of those kind of things. It's just an observation and maybe something to take note of where they feel comfortable and where that could feel more comfortable if they were being, honest with themselves. Like where it's like a spectrum thing. Somebody could become more in touch with their femininity. Doesn't mean they have to stop listening to metal music, but they might not have such an attraction to it, for example. Just some observations there.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why it becomes a matter of practical importance in the academy. Because submission and dominance, and when I say dominance, remember, I mean devoted leadership. Submission is so challenging for women who have been very masculinized. And what happens is this idea of the inner masculine becomes their subtle resistance to submitting. Because they're like, well, I can just do this all by myself. I've got my inner masculine. I'm not going to fully submit. If you don't fully submit, you're not going to receive that full provision and have that optimal polarization and devotion. Same with men. If men are all into the inner feminine, they're going to be like, well, I like this leading idea. It's really great, but I still need to express my feelings to my woman. Mm-hmm. And if they do that, then it's going to be supremely depolarizing, and she will not submit to a man who's sharing his feelings. So, because she can't, because she doesn't feel safe.
Right.
And so there's some real practical applications. This is one of the reasons I ride this issue pretty hard on my wall.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Because again, taking it back to what I said earlier, it's all means to an end to getting your needs met. But you have to have that self-worth in place because, say, the feminine, by expressing her feelings vulnerably, it feels much easier for her to lean into the masculine to just say, well, this is what I need. So you can just meet my need, right? But it's because she has a underlying belief that her feelings alone are not powerful and worthy of being served, so that she needs that other route to take. That's what feels safe. What's so interesting is men have the same, but the exact opposite. It's like, well, if I just tell her how I feel, she'll care about that, and then she'll just meet my needs. That's easier than me leading and stepping up and being, that's what I see as the masculine version of being vulnerable, is putting yourself out there as a leader, because you're not risking, like the woman speaking about feelings, she's risking not being listened to and not being cared for and provided for. The man is risking rejection and, you know, that not being received end of things. And that's just as scary.
Yeah, I mean, he's facing the rejection of his need to lead.
Right.
Yeah, I'm impressed with your grasp of what we're coaching.
Thanks.
You really get it. And not many people get it at that degree. Your grasp is fantastic, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great stuff. So, Mark, we have been covering a lot of ground here. I'm sure this is a lot for you, the audience, to take in and digest and process. And, you know, perhaps we could do another segment like this where we go into more depth and unpack more of this, because, boy, is there a lot there. I mean, this really is one of the most important topics, in my opinion. There's no greater split 50-50 you'll find anywhere than between men and women. You know, any kind of way, this is the ultimate battlefield and the front lines of the divide and conquer agenda. So it's definitely time to put in that work to heal this rift, to bring the beauty, all the beauty and perfection of the masculine and feminine beings, and bring that back into unity, because that's truly what's going to not only heal and turn our human experience into heaven on earth, but be a turning point for this absolute warfare that's being waged upon us. So it's been such a pleasure having you on, Mark, and chatting with you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. And thank you all for tuning in. I hope you got some value out of this. If so, do like the video. It takes 2 seconds and it really helps us out. If you're on the podcast platform, follow. If you're here on YouTube, subscribe and hit that bell notification. And we will see you next time. But until then, be empowered, inspired, and encouraged.